In Canada and around the world, Remembrance Day is observed on the 11th of November to recall the end of hostilities of the First World War on that date in 1918. Every year on Remembrance Day, we acknowledge the courage and sacrifice of Canadians who served their country, and we acknowledge our own responsibility to work for the peace they fought hard to achieve. In honor of Remembrance Day, I want to share 4 books by Canadian authors who describe the experience of war and remind us of its impact on human life and its long legacy. First up, we have Forgiveness by Mark Sakamoto. Forgiveness tells the story of how Mark Sakamoto's grandparents survived 2 very different experiences of the war. At its heart, this is the compelling true story of 2 families on either side of the Second World War and a moving tribute to the nature of forgiveness. Mark Sakamoto's maternal grandfather, Ralph, was captured by the Japanese army. In prison camps, he endured pestilence, beatings, and starvation, and in Japan he was forced into slave labor, while around him his countrymen perished. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Mark's paternal grandmother, Mitsu, was forced out of her home in Vancouver and then forced to spend years in rural Alberta working other people's land for $1 a day. A generation later, at a high school dance, Ralph's daughter and Mitsu's son fell in love. Although the war once played havoc with Ralph's and Mitsu's lives and threatened to erase their humanity, these 2 individuals somehow survived the brutality and cruelty of war and learned to forgive. It goes without saying that if it were not for the depth of their forgiveness, their grandson Mark Sakamoto would not be here to tell this tale. Forgiveness has won a number of awards, and it also won Canada Reads when it was defended by Jeannie Becker. Next up, we have The Secret History of Soldiers, How Canadians Survived the Great War by Tim Cook. There have been thousands of books on the Great War, but most have focused on commanders, battles, strategy, and tactics. Very little attention has been paid to the daily lives of combatants and how they endured the unimaginable conditions of industrial warfare, the rain of shells, bullets, chemical agents. The violence of war is always present, but Cook reveals the gallows humor that the soldiers used to get through it. The Secret History of Soldiers examines how those who survived trench warfare on the Western Front found entertainment and distraction from the relentless slaughter at the front lines through songs, skits, art, and soldier-produced newspapers. Cook gathered stories from over 5,000 combatants using their letters, diaries, memoirs, and oral accounts. Rare examples of trench art, postcards, and even song sheets offer some insight into a hidden society that was often irreverent, raunchy, and even anti-authoritarian. If you've ever wondered how real people got through the endless days of World War I, this is the book that's going to tell you the real story. Next we have The Water Beetles by Michael Kahn. In The Water Beetles, the lives of the wealthy Leung family are catastrophically altered by the Japanese invasion of Hong Kong in December 1941. The family is quickly dragged into a spiral of violence, repression, and starvation, and they're forced to send their children away. The siblings seek refuge in the countryside, only to be captured and tortured by Japanese soldiers. The youngest of the siblings, Chung Man, survives this cycle of violence and punishment but lives the rest of his life with deep, deep scars. Chung Man drifts along respectfully and dutifully, and it's only as he leaves his home once again, this time for university in America, that he finally glimpses a way to keep living with his troubled and divided self. The Water Beetles is an engrossing story of adventure and survival, capturing the horror of war through the eyes of a child. This book won the 2018 Amazon.ca First Novel Award and was a finalist for the 2017 Governor-General's Literary Award for Fiction. And finally, we have Tiny Lights for Travelers by Naomi K. Lewis. Facing the sudden dissolution of her marriage, Naomi Lewis uncovers a family treasure, her grandfather's diary, which details his escape from Nazi-occupied Netherlands in the summer of 1942. Naomi Lewis decides to retrace his journey to freedom. Traveling alone from Amsterdam to Lyon, She discovers family secrets and her own narrative as a second-generation Jewish Canadian. With vulnerability, humor, and wisdom, Lewis's memoir asks the tough questions about her identity as a secular Jew, the accuracy of family stories, and the impact of the Holocaust on subsequent generations. Whenever I read a book review, there's always a little something that makes me feel like I really need to read this book, and in this case it was a quote from the book itself. "Why couldn't I occupy the world as those model-looking women did, with their flowing hair, pulling their tiny bright suitcases as if to say, 'I just arrived from elsewhere, and I already belong here, and this sidewalk belongs to me.'" Tiny Lights for Travelers was a finalist for the 2019 Governor General's Literary Award for Nonfiction. Visit us at opl.ca for more books about Remembrance Day.